My name's Michael Kowalski. Or it was. Still is, I guess, but it feels like it belongs to someone else now, someone I vaguely remember. Before everything went sideways, I was 38 years old, living in Rosedale, a town just outside Cleveland that had seen better days, just like the factory where I worked. Precision Auto Parts churned out components for cars I couldn't afford. I worked the second shift on the stamping line. Loud, repetitive, mind-numbing work. Punch in, 8 hours of clang and grind, punch out. 5 days a week, sometimes 6 if overtime was mandatory. Life wasn't bad, exactly. It just was. Predictable. My apartment was small, overlooking a parking lot, furnished with stuff I'd had since my 20s. Evenings were usually takeout pizza or a microwave meal, zoning out in front of the TV watching whatever game was on, maybe a couple of beers to take the edge off the noise still ringing in my ears from the factory. Weekends. Slept in late, maybe met up with a couple of guys from work, Dave or Sal, down at O'Malley's pub for burgers and more beers, complained about the Browns or the plant manager. Rinse, repeat. I wasn't unfriendly, just disconnected. Never married, dated a bit here and there years ago, nothing stuck. Family was my sister, Linda, down in Florida, busy with her own kids. We exchanged Christmas cards, maybe a phone call on birthdays. That was about it. I wasn't unhappy, not really. But I wasn't happy either. I was just existing. Treading water. Paying the bills, getting by. God. Religion. Yeah, I wasn't hostile or anything. Went to church a few times as a kid, Catholic school for a couple of years till my folks pulled me out. It just never clicked. Seemed like a lot of rules and rituals that didn't have much to do with putting food on the table or fixing a leaky faucet. I figured if there was a God, he was probably busy with more important stuff than watching over Mike Kowalski on the stamping line. I didn't deny him, but I didn't exactly seek him out either. Life was about tangible things, the paycheck, the rent, the next shift. If there was an afterlife, some big reckoning or whatever, well, I figured I'd deal with it when I got there. Seemed like a problem for old age. I had plenty of time to figure that stuff out later, right? That was the assumption, the one underlying everything. Plenty of time. Turned out, I was dead wrong. It was a Tuesday night in late October. Rain had been falling steadily since mid-afternoon, that cold, persistent Ohio rain that seeps into your bones. Second shift had been brutal, a machine malfunctioned early on, putting us behind schedule, meaning mandatory overtime. By the time I finally punched out close to midnight, I was bone-tired, muscles aching, head throbbing from the relentless noise and the stress of trying to make quota. All I wanted was my lumpy couch and the oblivion of sleep. My car, a 10-year-old Chevy sedan that had seen better days, coughed to life under the flickering sodium lights of the factory parking lot. The radio crackled, playing some generic pop song I didn't recognize and didn't care about. I just wanted to get home. The drive wasn't long, maybe 15 miles on Route 42, a 2-lane highway cutting through semi-rural sprawl, strip malls giving way to dark fields and scattered houses. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming against the roof, smearing the windshield almost as fast as the worn-out wipers could clear it. Visibility was lousy. Headlights from oncoming traffic reflected blindingly off the wet pavement. I'd driven this route hundreds, maybe thousands of times. Knew every curve, every pothole. Muscle memory took over, my mind already half asleep, numbly calculating how many hours until the alarm would blast me awake for the next shift. I remember thinking vaguely about needing new tires, the car felt a little slippery on the wet road. Then, chaos erupted out of the rainy darkness. A blinding glare stabbed through the downpour, headlights, way too bright, way too close, and directly in my lane. A massive semi-truck, its horn blaring a panicked, deafening note, had jackknifed or swerved across the center line. There was no time to think, barely time to react. Instinct slammed my foot on the brake, wrenched the steering wheel hard to the right, aiming for the muddy shoulder. But the wet road, the worn tires, the sheer physics of tons of steel moving at highway speed, it wasn't enough. The world exploded in a sickening screech of tortured metal, the horrific crunch of steel impacting steel. My car crumpled like a tin can against the truck's grill. The windshield imploded, showering me with 1,000 glittering shards of glass in slow motion. I felt a blinding, searing impact against my head and chest. And then, nothing. Absolute silence. Absolute blackness. No pain. No fear. Just cessation. The engine noise, the rain, the blaring horn, the pop song on the radio, all extinguished in an instant. Utter void. For a moment that stretched into an eternity, there was only that profound nothingness. I thought, okay, this is it. Knocked out cold. Maybe worse. But then, awareness returned, sharp and clear, startlingly lucid. Except, I wasn't in the pain anymore. I wasn't in the wreckage. I was floating. Gently, weightlessly, about 10 feet above the mangled heap of metal that used to be my Chevy. The rain was still falling, plastering my hair, no, the hair of the body down there, to its forehead. I could see myself slumped over the steering wheel, head lolling at an unnatural angle. Blood matted that hair, streamed down a face that was pale and utterly still. My arm, the one that had gripped the wheel, hung limp and twisted through the shattered driver's side window. It was gruesome, a scene from a horror movie. But the horror wasn't mine. I felt detached, strangely objective, like watching a news report about some unfortunate stranger. The intense fatigue from the factory, the sudden terror of the crash, the expected agony, all gone. Replaced by a profound sense of peace, a lightness I'd never experienced before. It was like shedding a heavy, ill-fitting coat I hadn't even realized I was wearing my whole life. Below, the scene buzzed with frantic activity. Flashing red and blue lights painted the raindrops, casting eerie shadows. Paramedics were working desperately, using hydraulic tools, the jaws of life, to pry open the driver's side door. I heard their shouts, muffled by the rain and my strange detachment. No pulse. Pupils fixed and dilated. Severe head trauma, possible internal injuries. Someone was trying to start an 4 in the arm of the body, my arm, while another prepared defibrillator paddles, though it seemed more from protocol than hope. The truck driver, a heavy-set man in a flannel shirt, stood by the side of the road, talking to a state trooper, looking dazed, gesturing wildly, his face pale with shock. Other cars had stopped, onlookers staring with morbid curiosity from beneath umbrellas. I should have been terrified. Panicked. Grieving the sudden, violent end of my life. But I wasn't. The dominant feeling was this incredible calm, this sense of release. It wasn't indifference, I recognized the body as mine, felt a faint echo of connection to it. But it was clear that I, the thinking, feeling, aware part of Mike Kowalski, was no longer inside it. That mangled form was just a vessel, broken beyond repair. And I was free. Then, amidst the flashing lights and the falling rain, I felt it. A gentle but insistent pull, not physical, more like a magnetic draw on my consciousness. It wasn't forceful or scary, more like an invitation, a beckoning towards something unseen. The chaotic scene below began to fade, the sounds grew distant, the flashing lights dimmed. The pull intensified, drawing me away from the wreckage, away from the rainy Ohio highway, towards something else entirely. The transition wasn't like flipping a switch from the rainy accident scene to somewhere else. It was more like the world I knew dissolved, gently fading like watercolor bleeding off a page, while a new reality solidified around me. The pull drew me away from the wreckage, and the darkness of the night didn't deepen, instead, it yielded to a growing luminescence. It wasn't a tunnel of light, not exactly. It felt more like I was moving into the source of light itself. And this light was unlike anything I'd ever conceived. It wasn't the harsh glare of the sun or the cold, sterile light of the factory floor. This light was alive. It pulsed with warmth, with energy, with love. That sounds crazy, I know. Light doesn't feel. But this did. It felt like stepping into a warm ocean of pure acceptance, washing over me, through me, cleansing away the grime of my earthly existence. There was no sense of traveling vast distances or passing through distinct realms. It was a shift in awareness, an immersion into a state of being that was infinitely more real, more vibrant, than the life I just left. Colors existed here that have no name on earth, swirling and blending within the light, creating patterns of breathtaking beauty. Music resonated, not from a specific source, but woven into the very fabric of this place, harmonies more complex and beautiful than any orchestra could produce, evoking feelings of profound peace and overwhelming joy. I wasn't floating aimlessly, there was a sense of direction, a continued gentle drawing towards the heart of this luminous reality. I didn't have a body, yet I felt whole, complete, more myself than I had ever felt constrained within flesh and bone. My thoughts were clear, faster, unburdened by physical limitations. And then, within the heart of this living, loving light, I sensed a presence. It wasn't something I saw with eyes I didn't have, but a knowing that bloomed within my consciousness, absolute and undeniable. It was a focal point within the light, a concentration of the love and power that permeated everything, yet distinctly personal. Jesus. The name formed in my awareness without conscious thought. Me, Mike Kowalski, the guy who hadn't cracked open a Bible since parochial school, the guy who figured God was too busy for him, I knew it was him. Instantly. Unequivocally. All the skepticism I'd carried, the indifference, the casual disbelief, it evaporated like mist in the morning sun. Standing, or whatever I was doing, in that presence, doubt was simply impossible. The reality of him was more tangible, more certain, than the factory floor or the rain-slicked highway I just left behind. His holiness was palpable, awe-inspiring, yet paradoxically, it didn't crush me. It was tempered, enveloped, by a love so immense, so personal, so unconditional, that it defied all logic and expectation. He knew me. Completely. And he loved me anyway. The sheer, unmerited grace of it was staggering. He didn't speak immediately, not with words. Communication here transcended language. It was a flow of understanding, heart to heart, mind to mind. His focus turned fully towards me, and in that loving, omniscient gaze, my life unfolded. It wasn't like watching a movie on fast forward. It was more like standing within the moments themselves, yet seeing them simultaneously from my own limited perspective and from his all-encompassing viewpoint, illuminated by the light of eternal truth and perfect love. There it was, my life, unedited, unvarnished. 38 years of ordinary existence. I saw myself as a kid, arguing with my sister over a toy. As a teenager, awkwardly trying to fit in, sometimes being unkind to others to feel bigger. I saw the years at the factory, the complaining, the gossip, the shortcuts taken when the foreman wasn't looking. I saw the countless hours slumped in front of the TV, letting life drift by, seeking numbness rather than engagement. More pointedly, I saw the missed opportunities. The coworker, Dave, going through a rough divorce, obviously needing someone to talk to, and me making a quick excuse to leave the break room because I didn't want to get involved. The homeless man I hurried past downtown, avoiding eye contact, clutching my wallet tighter. The times I felt that inner nudge, a fleeting thought to call my sister, a moment of wanting something more than the daily grind, a brief sense of wonder looking up at the stars, only to push it away, burying it under fatigue or indifference. I saw the choices I'd made, not necessarily big dramatic sins, but the thousand small decisions that prioritized comfort over compassion, apathy over action, self over others, the material over the spiritual. I saw how I'd lived a life focused almost entirely on the surface, chasing temporary satisfaction, ignoring the deeper currents, the real purpose for which I was made. The emptiness I sometimes felt but always ignored, I now saw its source clearly. It was the echo of a soul starving for connection with its creator, a connection I'd never bothered to cultivate. The weight of my wasted potential, my self-imposed limitations, was heavy. Shame washed over me, not shame inflicted by him, but arising naturally from the stark contrast between my small, fearful, self-absorbed life and the infinite, generous love that now enveloped me. I had been given the incredible gift of existence, of consciousness, of free will, and I had largely squandered it on trivialities. Yet, unbelievably, there was no condemnation in his presence. Not a hint of anger or disappointment. Only love. A deep, penetrating, sorrowful love that acknowledged my failures but never stopped cherishing the soul he had created. It was a love that grieved my choices but celebrated my existence. It was this unconditional acceptance, this perfect understanding coupled with perfect love, that finally broke through the last vestiges of my defenses. Overwhelmed, humbled, and profoundly grateful, my consciousness instinctively bowed in adoration before the sheer magnitude of his mercy. Lord, the thought formed, raw and heartfelt, forgive me. You were created for so much more, Michael. The understanding flowed from him, gentle but clear, echoing the truth I had just witnessed in my life review. Not just for survival, but for love. Not just to exist, but to live with purpose, in connection with me and with others. He then broadened my perspective beyond my own small life. My awareness expanded, and I perceived the earth, not as a physical globe, but as a complex tapestry of souls, emotions, and spiritual energies. I saw humanity, billions of people rushing, striving, worrying, much like I had. The vision wasn't just a generic overview, it was piercingly specific. I saw people glued to screens, phones, computers, TVs, their attention captivated by fleeting images, endless streams of information, virtual realities, while often remaining oblivious to the deeper needs of those right beside them, and blind to the spiritual dimension underpinning their lives. I saw the frantic pace of modern life, the obsession with careers, status, possessions, the constant pursuit of the next acquisition, the next thrill, the next distraction, all attempts to fill an inner void that only he could truly satisfy. I saw churches, beautiful buildings, some filled with people going through rituals learned by rote, their hearts and minds elsewhere, reciting prayers mechanically without engaging their souls. I saw others nearly empty, dusty relics of a faith that seemed increasingly irrelevant to the noisy, fast-paced world outside. But I also saw the hunger. Beneath the surface of the frantic activity and the apparent indifference, I perceived a deep, often unconscious, yearning in countless souls. A longing for meaning, for connection, for truth, for love, a homing instinct for God they didn't recognize or know how to follow. They were searching desperately, often in the wrong places, mistaking illusions for reality. And then, Jesus impressed upon me the most sobering part of the vision, the core of his warning. They live as if this life is all there is. The communication resonated with divine sorrow and urgency. They believe they have unlimited time. They chase shadows and neglect the substance. They don't realize how quickly their opportunity is passing. I saw a subtle but pervasive darkness spreading across the world. Not necessarily overt evil in the form of wars or cataclysms, but something more insidious, deception. A creeping spiritual apathy masquerading as tolerance. Materialism presented as the ultimate goal. False philosophies and hollow ideologies promising fulfillment but leading only to emptiness. The normalization of sin, the dismissal of absolute truth, the subtle erosion of faith presented as enlightenment. It was like a slow-acting poison, lulling souls into a comfortable slumber from which they might never awaken. Time is shorter than they know, the message burned into my consciousness. Not necessarily predicting an imminent apocalypse, but highlighting the precious, finite nature of mortal life and the eternal consequences of choices made within it. The urgency wasn't about fear, but about love, the desperate desire of the Creator for his children to wake up, to choose truth, to embrace the love and purpose for which they were made before their chance slipped away. Yet, even amidst this sobering vision, there was light. I saw small, hidden pockets of genuine faith. A mother praying quietly for her children long after they were asleep. A volunteer patiently serving meals at a homeless shelter, unnoticed by the world. Friends supporting each other through hardship with genuine compassion. Individuals seeking God earnestly in the quiet of their hearts. These are the ones who know me, Jesus communicated, his presence radiating warmth towards these faithful souls. Their love, their prayers, are lights holding back the darkness. The contrast was stark, a world largely asleep or chasing illusions, while time slipped away, yet punctuated by hidden beacons of hope reflecting his own light. Standing in the light, having seen the unvarnished truth of my own life and the precarious state of the world, a part of me felt an overwhelming desire to simply dissolve into the love and peace surrounding me. To stay forever in this place where the struggles, the noise, the emptiness of my former life held no power. No more factory whistle, no more bills, no more gnawing sense of meaninglessness. Just this. Just him. But Jesus turned his focus fully back to me, his presence both infinitely gentle and undeniably authoritative. Michael, your time on earth is not yet finished. My soul recoiled slightly. The thought of returning to that broken body, to that broken world, felt like being asked to plunge back into ice water after basking in the sun. Lord, no, please, the thought screamed silently within me. I can't go back there. I want to stay here with you. He acknowledged my desire, my reluctance. I felt his understanding, his compassion for my weariness. But his purpose remained firm. There are others, Michael. Many like you were. Asleep. Adrift. Chasing things that cannot satisfy. They are not beyond hope, but they need a wake-up call. They need to hear from someone who has seen. He wasn't asking me to become a preacher or a theologian. He knew who I was, an ordinary guy, rough around the edges, not eloquent, not learned in scripture. But perhaps that was the point. If someone like me could come back with this message, maybe others like me would listen. Some are ready to hear, the understanding flowed. Their hearts are prepared, but they are lost in the noise. They need a voice they can recognize, a story that breaks through their complacency. You must go back and share what you have experienced. Tell them the life they are living is not the only reality. Tell them time is precious. Tell them I am real, and I am waiting. He placed within me, not with words, but as a direct impartation, the weight of this mission. It felt heavy, daunting. How could I, Mike Kowalski, do this? Who would possibly believe me? Yet, looking into the face of that overwhelming love, feeling the truth of his words resonate in the core of my being, refusal was impossible. The love I felt compelled a response. It wasn't a coerced obedience, but a willing surrender born of awe and gratitude. If he believed I could do this, if he was asking me, then I had to try. With a final, profound act of will, surrendering my desire to stay, I consented. Yes, Lord. I don't know how, but I'll go. I'll tell them. A sense of divine approval, a final surge of strengthening love flowed from him. You will not be alone. And then, the light began to recede, the connection started to thin, and I felt myself being drawn back, away from the peace, away from the presence, back towards the brokenness I had left behind. The return was instantaneous and brutal. One moment, enveloped in love and light, the next, slammed back into the confines of flesh and bone with agonizing force. A massive gasp tore through my lungs, sucking in the cold, damp air. Pain exploded everywhere, my head, my chest, my limbs felt like they were on fire, crushed, shattered. My eyes flew open, but all I saw were blurred shapes, flashing lights through a haze of pain. Then voices, loud, urgent, laced with utter shock. He's breathing. He just gasped. Get the collar back on. Got a pulse. Freddy, but it's there. What the hell? I swear he was gone. No vital signs for minutes. Hands were on me, probing, stabilizing my neck, cutting away my blood-soaked jacket. The sharp scent of antiseptic filled the air. I tried to speak, to groan, but only a strangled sound came out. The pain was immense, overwhelming, a stark contrast to the perfect peace I'd just experienced. But beneath the pain, there was something else, life. I was alive. And I was different. The journey to the hospital was a blur of sirens, bumps, and pain management. In the ER, doctors and nurses worked quickly, assessing the damage. Severe concussion, multiple fractured ribs, internal bleeding, a broken arm, countless cuts and bruises. The initial prognosis had been grim, if not fatal. Yet, scans revealed something astonishing: the internal bleeding was less severe than expected, already slowing. My vital signs, though initially weak, were stabilizing with remarkable speed. Over the next few days, my recovery continued at a pace that baffled the medical staff. Remarkable, Dr. Evans, the trauma surgeon, kept saying, reviewing my charts. Given the mechanism of injury and your initial presentation, frankly, Michael, you're lucky to be alive, let alone healing this quickly. Your resilience is atypical. They attributed it to luck, adrenaline, maybe some unknown physiological factor. But I knew. It wasn't luck. It was grace. A confirmation of the mission. Jesus hadn't just sent me back, he'd sent me back functional, able to deliver the message. Getting out of the hospital felt like stepping onto an alien planet. The world looked the same, the gray skies, the familiar streets of Rosedale, the looming silhouette of the factory in the distance. But I was different. The old apathy was gone, replaced by a burning sense of urgency. The mundane things I used to focus on, the next shift, the TV schedule, the weekend beers, seemed utterly trivial, almost absurd, compared to the reality I now carried within me. Telling people wasn't easy. How do you start that conversation? Hey Dave, funny thing happened after I technically died in that car crash. I started cautiously, first with my sister Linda over the phone. She listened patiently, probably thought the head injury or the pain meds were making me delirious, but she was kind. I tried talking to Sal from work when he visited. He just clapped me on the shoulder, said, "Wow, man, heavy stuff. Glad you're okay," and quickly changed the subject to football. There was skepticism, awkward silence, sometimes pitying looks. Some suggested grief counseling, therapy for PTSD. I understood their reactions. A week before, I would have reacted the same way. But their disbelief didn't shake my certainty. I knew what I had seen, what I had heard, what I had felt. My life had to change. I couldn't go back to the stamping line, punching the clock on a life that felt meaningless. After recovering physically, I found a different job, quieter work driving a delivery truck for a local bakery. It paid less, but it gave me time to think, to pray, something that felt awkward at first, but increasingly natural. I started reading the Bible Linda sent me, not out of obligation, but with a genuine hunger to understand more about the Jesus I had met. I haven't become a saint overnight. I still get frustrated, still make mistakes. But the foundation has shifted. My priorities are different. I try to be more aware of the people around me, to offer a kind word, to help when I can, seeing them now through the lens of His love and the urgency of time. And I tell my story. Whenever I feel a nudge, whenever an opportunity arises, talking to a coworker, a neighbor, sometimes even strangers I meet on my route, I share what happened. I tell them about the crash, the light, the love, and the warning. I'm no preacher, I usually start, I'm just a regular guy who got a second chance, and I gotta tell you what I learned: this life isn't a dress rehearsal. Time is shorter than we think. We gotta wake up and start living like it matters, connect with God, love people. Don't wait. Please, don't wait. Some listen. Some don't. Some walk away thoughtful. That's okay. My job isn't to convince everyone. My job is just to deliver the message, to be the wake-up call I was sent back to be. Because I know, with a certainty forged beyond the veil of death, that He is real, His love is waiting, and the clock is ticking for all of us. Are you awake? Or are you still hitting the snooze button?